Hey, what's up, everybody? True Boxing here. Thank you for coming back to get hit with the truth. So today, doing the Charlo versus Castano breakdown video. You know, I announced this fight was on, I don't know, whenever they announced it was on. And so Saturday, July 17th, we're just over 2 weeks away. These two will clash for the undisputed junior middleweight championship or super welterweight championship, whatever you want to call it. It's 154 pounds. And these are the top two guys at 154 right now. You got Charlo, the two-time champ. He unified belts in his last fight against Jason Rosario when he dominated him, stopped him in 8 rounds. You know, and unified 3 of the 4 titles at 154. And then Castano, in February, dominated Patrick Teixeira over 12 rounds and claimed the world title. He's still undefeated. Only has that draw on his resume against Arislani Lara in a fight where he came in a big underdog. So this is a big fight right here. Big fight. Now, normally with my breakdown videos, it's only the top 12 most must-see fighters in the sport. And Charlo is close to being one of the top 12 guys. He's kind of in my top 15 or so. But he's not one of those guys. And Castano isn't. But because this is for the undisputed title, I have to do a breakdown video on it. I have to. That's a big deal, you know. I mean, people do not respect. I don't think the Undisputed Championship is getting enough respect because there's 4 major world titles in every weight class. 4. You got secondary belts now and all that bullshit that kind of waters it down. I mean, having 4 belts itself to a lot of people waters it down. But the thing is you do have 4 major world championships, and you know, people have to be able to understand that these two guys in this fight right here, they're competing to become only the 7th person in any weight class to unify all 4 belts. This is a rare and tough accomplishment to be able to pull off right here. It really is. So for these guys to be with the same promotion, to come together to make the fight, you got to hand it to Charlo, you got to hand it to Castano for wanting to prove that they are the best at what they do in their weight class. And, you know, the cool thing is it's the battle of the 1 versus 2. It really is, you know. Sometimes you don't get that scenario, you know, you really don't. But in this particular case, you do. And this is going to be the 3rd undisputed champion crown within the last calendar year. You know, and technically it's going to be the 3rd champion crown within the last 9 months, as we saw Lopez defeat Lomachenko last October, and then in just May you saw Josh Taylor beat Jose Ramirez to become the undisputed champ at 140. So this is the first time anybody's become undisputed champ at 154 in the 4-belt era. And it's just such a major deal that these two guys are locking horns and gonna determine who the best fighter at 154 is officially. So how I do my breakdown videos is I take each fighter, talk about what they have done coming into the fight, and then I jump to, you know, what kind of game plan do they need to have to win. Can they win by knockout? Can they win by decision? And then lastly, you know, and I do that on both sides. And then lastly, I break down the, you know, I give my prediction on the fight. You know, I also talk about what it would mean to them if they win, what it means to boxing if they win, what it means to them in boxing if they lose. So cover a lot of things in these breakdown videos, and they take up some time, but they're fun, and I get my most hits on these videos. I really do. My most seen video was the Canelo and Billy Joe Saunders one, where I got over 1,200 views. My second most was the Lopez and Lomachenko one, where I got over 1,000 views. So, you know, these ones, I'm already at 82 views in only 3 days on the Fury versus Wilder 3. So, you know, a lot of people tune in to watch these videos, and I'm proud of that. So let's break down this fight for the undisputed super welterweight championship. we start with the favorite, Jermell Charlo. Well, Jermell Charlo, in terms of accomplishment, he's coming off his biggest win, accomplishment-wise, of his career, where he dominated Jason Rosario. I definitely don't think it was his toughest test or biggest name, but Rosario had upset Julian Williams, J-Rock, in January of last year, and took 2 of the 4 belts. And then he ran into Charlo, you know, and Charlo dominated him, you know, really, really dominated Rosario. Broke him down. I think he put him down like 4 times in that fight, and he stopped him on a body punch in the 8th round. So, you know, I wasn't surprised that he beat Rosario, because Rosario kind of came out of nowhere to upset J-Rock. I didn't think Rosario was 100% legit. You know, because that was his lone victory over J-Rock, and I don't think J-Rock's 100% legit, you know, but both those guys got a couple major upset victories, and, you know, Charlo took advantage of who was holding those belts and defeated, you know, Rosario. But prior to that, Charlo had regained his world title with a hard-fought 11th round TKO over Tony Harrison, and avenged the only pro defeat of his career that he suffered in December of 2018 to Harrison by a very close and controversial 12-round unanimous decision. But, you know, so right now, Charlo's confidence is, in my opinion, it's through the roof in terms of him. You know, and he has declared himself the #1 fighter at 154. He really has. He's earned that distinction. Unifying 3 of the 4 belts really helped him out also. But, you know, just who he's beaten, what he's done so far, it does matter. And I can't wait to see him in a ring against Castano, because I think it's his toughest matchup. I really do. I think he is going to have his hands full, and I want to see if he can handle that. Now, the game plan. What kind of game plan does he need to have to beat Brian Castano? And the truth is, his stamina's got to be there. He's got to have very good stamina. He's got to really train for 12 hard rounds in this fight. And he's got to be ready to throw a lot of punches. I think that's the only way he's going to be able to fend off Brian Castano, is throwing a lot of punches. Precisionally timed punches. Also, he needs to set up his punches and land those shots that are going to back Castano off of him. Castano's going to be coming. He's going to be trying to hit from different angles, in my opinion. And Charlo has to figure those angles out and stick them. And I think one of the ways of doing that is throwing a big power jab to Castano to get him off his balance, off his line of coming forward or hitting those angles. He's got to use his jab. He really does. He needs to use the jab, use the jab, use the jab, set up the power punch, you know, and hopefully he's got enough pop to fend off Brian Castano. So that's the kind of style I think he needs to have a shot at winning. Now, do I think he can knock Brian Castano out? You know, I have not seen Brian Castano get hurt yet. Patrick Teixeira packed a pretty good punch and landed some pretty good shots on Castano, who kept coming, and it didn't really seem to phase Castano. So can Charlo win by knockout? I mean, conceivably, yeah, anybody can win by knockout, but I think less likely that this is going to happen with Brian Castano. That's why I think Charlo needs to prepare for 12 full rounds. Can Charlo win a decision? I think he can. You know, I think it's a good fight. He's going to have to really control the tempo and land, you know, not necessarily more shots, but he's got to land the better shots. He really does to win this fight, to win a decision here. I think he's got his hands full. It's going to be a tough fight. And, you know, if he can control the tempo and the pace of the fight and really outwork Castano and land the better punches, then I think he's got a good chance of winning a decision. So I think he can win a decision. Now, what does it do for Charlo if he wins this fight? you know, if he wins, it's going to do him wonders. Becoming an undisputed champion, him and his brother already have pretty good-sized names in boxing right now. But I really think it keeps him a step ahead of his brother, and it makes him an undisputed champ at 154, and really just kind of lets everybody know that this guy's a real player, and he's ready to, you know, take on the big dogs and possibly cross the street. It's going to be big for Charlo if he wins this fight. It really is. It'll be his career best win, and definitely his toughest opponent. So big it will be for Charlo if he wins. Now, what does it mean for boxing if Charlo wins? You know, Charlo's a flashy guy. He's undefeated. He's flashy. He's loud. He's definitely that prototypical fighter that you don't have to like him, but, you know, he does get a lot of viewership. He does get people interested in watching him fight, and, you know, it's going to be good for boxing if he beats Castano to become the undisputed champion, because boxing does need that element of fighter that it has that bravado and that flashy kind of style that makes everybody want to see him, you know, want to see him fight, and a lot of people want to see him lose, myself included. But you know, if Charlo can so-call that in and walk away with a victory here, you know, he's got a real chance of becoming a just absolute superstar. So it'd be big for boxing. What does it mean for Charlo if he loses his fight to Breidis and Castano? It's going to be a tough loss for him. He's coming in the favorite. If he were to lose, I don't think most people will, you know, most boxing critics will be surprised if he loses the fight. But it's definitely a step back. You know, it'd be his second fight in less than 3 years that he would lose. You know, how he lost would definitely matter. If he goes out there and gets dominated coming in as the favorite, that would probably hurt him. You know, people would not write him off, but I just think they would look at him like, well, he's not that great. You know, he's okay, but he's not a great fighter. You know, and that's why it's going to be a tough one if he loses. It really will. What does it mean for boxing if he loses? You know, again, I said boxing needs guys like him, but if he loses, I don't think too many people are going to be surprised. But, you know, is it going to hurt boxing? Maybe for one of their flashy kind of, you know, fighters that is loud and they need to sell the sport a little bit more. You know, but overall, I think boxing's going to be okay if he loses the fight, but it's still, you know, it's still going to hurt it a little bit, you know, because Charlo is one of those guys that is close to the top 12 for the most must-see fighters, and, you know, he's you know, people want to see the best fighters fight the best, and we're talking about the name fighters too, not just, you know, the best on paper like Castano is, you know, even though a lot of people don't know him. So that's that. Now let's jump into the underdog, Breidis and Castano, and look at his, you know, pedigree and what he's got to do. So, Castano's coming in off the best win of his career. He dominated Patrick Teixeira in February, became the WBO champion, winning his first major world title. You know, this guy just over 2 years ago, in May of 2019, took on Erislandy Lara after Lara returned from an 11-month layoff and the fight of the year against Jarrett Hurd, and he fought Lara to a draw. And a lot of people were surprised by that, myself included. Maybe Lara was overlooking him, but he went out there and really let everybody know where he stands as a fighter and in the sport. So that was a major win for him. You know, our major win, even if it was just a draw, it was more of a victory for him. And then he followed that up with a win in between, and then got the shot at Teixeira, the mandatory shot, and he dominated Patrick Teixeira impressively and is now the WBO champion. So he's rolling in also off of his biggest win and has a lot going for him. Now, what's the game plan for Breidis and Castano to possibly win this fight? For me, I think he's got to really put the pressure on. He's got to be prepared for 12 hard rounds right here also, because he's got to be willing to put the pressure on Charlo from the start. He's got to box his way in, but Castano uses all his angles, and he uses them well, and he can take a punch. So I think he needs to take the risk of getting hit with a big shot and test out Charlo's power. You know, I think he needs to, you know, not just go in blind, but he needs to definitely get on the inside and start busting Charlo up and, you know, work his way in, because once he gets inside of Charlo's wingspan, I think he's going to have a very good chance, and he can get into Charlo's chest. He's going to have a very good chance of beating Charlo and putting that pressure on Charlo. Now, can Brian Castano win this fight by knockout? You know, I think if it were by knockout, it'd have to be from an accumulation and a beatdown of punches where he just wears Charlo down. Charlo does have a good chin. Castano, you know, he's not the biggest power puncher. He's got some pop, but I think it's less likely that he knocks Charlo out unless he completely wears him down and breaks him down. Then that's the only way I can see him kind of winning this fight like that. Excuse me. Can he win a decision? I think he can. I think he's got to get in there and he's got to outwork Charlo, and he's really got to make a great impression, outland him and outwork him in every round. And I think he's got a really good shot of winning a decision. So, yeah, I think he can win a decision. Now, what does it mean for Castano if he wins this fight? Oh, it's going to mean everything. It'd be for the undisputed title at 154. He'd go down in history. It would make him a star. It really would. And it would be his career best win. So, absolutely it would be huge for Brian Castano to win this fight. What does it mean for boxing if he wins this fight? Well, you know, boxing needs their flashy guys like Charlo, but I think they also need grinders like Brian Castano to make names for themselves so they can step out of that shadow of the big name fighters and become a big name themselves. So it's not going to be bad for boxing. He is an undefeated fighter. He's talented. You know, so I think it's going to be a good thing if he were to pull off the win. Now, what if he loses this fight? What is it going to mean to Castano? Well, I don't think people are going to be surprised if he loses this fight. You know, I think most people are expecting him to lose. You know, so he's kind of coming in a no, in my opinion, it's a no-lose situation, because nobody's expecting him to win this fight. So if he loses, it's whatever. But, you know, I also think if he loses because of that, you know, he's going to be able to bounce back very quickly, you know, because people aren't going to be too surprised if he loses. But the manner in which he loses will affect where he stands in the division and going forward. So if he comes out and he gets his ass whipped, it's going to be tough on him and you know, his progression going forward. But if he comes out and loses a close one, people are going to be like, well, this dude's legit. He's a really good fighter. You know, Charlo was just a little bit better. And I think he needs to come out and just leave it all out in the ring to, you know, ensure that he still has a lot going for him, win or lose after this fight. Now, what does it mean for boxing if he wins or if he loses? You know, it's not going to matter a lot to boxing because he's coming in an underdog and the B-side in terms of the name recognition. So, you know, I don't think it's going to really hurt boxing if Castano loses. And now the prediction of this fight. Who do I think is going to win? And, you know, surprisingly to most people, I'm picking Brian Castano to pull off the upset and become the undisputed champion. People are going to be surprised by this. People are going to think it's because I don't like Jermell Charlo. No, it has nothing to do with the fact that I don't like Jermell Charlo. Brian Castano showed me a very interesting style in his last fight against Patrick Teixeira, where he was working his way in and hitting from a lot of different angles. He takes the underdog role and he thrives in it, as you saw against Erislandy Lara. Brian Castano can bring it. He's the full package. He punches, he can punch with power, and he also hits from different angles, and he has a motor on him. He does not stop coming. And I think he's going to keep coming at Charlo. He's going to break him down. Charlo's going to be in the fight. Charlo's going to land his shots. But I think in the second half of the fight, Castano's going to take over. I think it's possible he stops him in the late rounds, but I think more likely a decision, and it could be a close decision. but I think Brian Castano is going to win this fight and become the undisputed champ. Now, Charlo, to me, does have a serious shot at winning. I think it's close to a 50-50 fight. It really is. Actually, it is a 50-50 fight. I think you can call it either way. I think both guys have a good shot at pulling off the win here. But I think Brian Castano is just a little bit better. I think Charlo hasn't faced a guy like him before, and I think Charlo's a little in over his head for this fight. And I think Castano's good to go because he's been the underdog before, and I don't think that phases him. So we'll see how it goes. Saturday, July 17th on Showtime. Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano for the undisputed super welterweight championship of the world at 154 pounds. I hope you guys enjoyed it. True Boxing, you've been hit with the truth.